Hello ladies and gents, boys and girls, it is I, Marzo, coming at you with yet another GT2 challenge video. Today's video will be featuring the Nissan Silvia S13. I am very excited for this run since this is one of the cars that I've said is a possible contender to win the game outright, and by winning I mean getting first place at the GT World Championship, which unlocks the credits in the arcade mode disc as a part of the bonus content, aka goodies, in the Japanese version of the game. The rules: no GameShark/cheat engine codes to add power or aid in grinding, no other cars besides the S13 Silvia, and that's for the rules. So let's check out the stats of the car. FR 202 horsepower, 1150 kilos stock. Fully upgraded, we are looking at a pretty healthy 380 horsepower and 1046 kilos of weight. Since I've decided to use the 2-liter turbo for this challenge, as I can afford one for the starting 10k, and it's more powerful when fully upgraded, which will give me more of a chance to properly finish the game. You usually can't use this car alone to beat the game since some of the national event horsepower requirements are too light to enter this car, so I've decided to buy the 2-liter naturally aspirated S13 to deal with those. For this run, I've decided to do the races not in order of license requirement like I've been doing, but in order of series. So instead of me just doing the B license races in order, I've done the whole cup as one race in the Clubman Cup demands you to have the B license, which is the last one, if I recall correctly. So I just did the whole of the Clubman Cup outright in one go. Since I already was in the Nissan dealership after buying the car, I decided to tackle the Silvia 1 make race. After taking care of that, I've decided to do the B license GT national events, immediately contradicting my intro statement about doing the races in order, but I was lazy and didn't want to go back to the garage to constantly swap cars, but from this point it's all in order as stated earlier. The first time round in all 3 of the Clubman Cup races resulted in failure. The first race at Rome I've lost due to not bothering to change my car. The second race on Grindelwald I was on track for a W, but my controller decided to die on me, and I couldn't countersteer while going around the hairpin, causing me to spin. And the third and final race at Rome was a combination of my incompetence and the bullying of the AI. Since for the last race I've decided to get sports stars, seeing as I've had trouble with grip on race 2. But it seems they didn't save me the first time round, so that's a note to self for future runs. Don't bother with sports stars. Oh, and the Sunday Cup was a lot easier, even without the sports stars, since I've decided to take them off. All 3 races were a breeze as per usual. Afterwards, I went after the tiny hatchbacks in the Compact Car Cup, which, apart from the hiccup on the first attempt on race 2, where I've bottled it at the end of the lap, I've managed to take care of the series like this. Before moving on, I decided to go back and do the A-license GT national events, but unfortunately for me, that clip got corrupted, so here's a cute kitten. In all fairness, you didn't really miss anything substantial to warrant going on a tirade, but if you want to go on one, I'm not going to stop you. And now back to your scheduled programming. With the early bits done, I took on the FR challenge, but beforehand, I've decided to future-proof my car by buying a Stage 1 turbo, a racing flywheel and drive shaft, super soft slicks, racing chip, muffler and intercooler, and as a cherry on top, sports suspension. For the first race, I took off most of the overpowered bits like the tires in favor of the sport ones and took off all of the horsepower upgrades apart from the chip. The race was a relative breeze. For race 2, I've decided to put on some of the horsepower bits back on, ending up with a rating of 231, keeping everything else the same. The race was another breeze, heading into race 3 and the final race of the series. I've decided to put the turbo on and took off some of the other bits to end up with a rating just under 260. This race was a loss, and if it even seemed as a rather close loss, the Corvette was just flying away on the straights. So for attempt number 2, I went and slapped on everything I had, including the super softs, which allowed me to claim the top spot on the leaderboard after 2 laps of me being chased around by a Supra. Next up, I've tackled the Sedan Cup. For the whole series, I've kept the car the same as it was in the final race of the FR Challenge, absolutely dominating races 1 and 2, and winning by a rather comfortable gap of 1.7 seconds on race 3, which is nowhere near the utter decimation of the first 2 races, but it was still a rather dominant victory. And now that I'm thinking about it, I should have probably taken off some of the bits of the car for a more entertaining race, but a win is a win and I do not care. Afterwards, I took on the Muscle Car Cup. After witnessing the power of this car when matched up against the sedans, I decided to take off most of the power bits, only leaving the turbo and the racing chip, sitting at a healthy 241 horsepower. Race 1 was relatively close since the Seattle short course is, well, a bit short. I couldn't take the advantage of the car's speed as well as the latter 2 races, which I've dominated, winning by 5 and 9.1 seconds respectively. Next on the agenda was the Convertible Cup, for which I've kept the same setup for the whole series, dominating race 1 by around a 9-second margin. Race 2 was more of a challenge, since the Dodge concept car, aka the Copperhead, was giving me a run for my money for the whole race, only managing to take first place after an aggressive late braking maneuver at the hairpin. And for the third and final race of the series, the cars have definitely given me quite a hard time the first time round, managing second place 1.3 seconds behind the leader, but managing to win the race next time round, with the opposition being on my rear for the whole race. Now to take care of the dreaded Historic Car Cup. Still keeping the same setup as before, I dominate race 1. Race 2 is notorious for being an absolute bitch to do, since a massive cheat appears in it, the Ford GT40 road car. And this time it was no different. Well, I say it was no different, but it only took me 3 attempts, with the final attempt having me to block the GT40 for the entire race. By some miracle, race number 3 was a first try win, even with the GT40 tailing me, and the best part was that I didn't even struggle to beat the GT40, which was quite a pleasant surprise. With the Historic Car Cup out of the way, next up is the Station Wagon Cup, which I take care of without too much issue. Afterwards is the 80s Sports Car Cup. For this one, I had to hop into my NA Silvia just for race 1, which is a bit annoying, but it had to be done. As for the race, it wasn't too difficult, but the AI were pretty close to me, probably due to the fact that the car is stock and because of course the rubber band factor. The rest of the series, I've had the car sitting with most, if not all, of the power bits on, sitting on about 270 horsepower. The rest of the series was an absolute breeze, meaning I was quite overpowered, but as long as I come out victorious, it will be alright, which I did. Next on the agenda, I decided to take on the GT Car Cup. Race number 1 at Red Rock Valley, which I've dominated even with a spin at lap 1, crossing the line at the final lap with a 7-second lead over the second place car. Race number 2 at Grand Valley was on track to be a repeat of the first race, but I've only managed to repeat the first bit of it, spinning out on lap 1 at the chicane after the Monaco-esque right-hand sweeper in the tunnel, struggling the whole race but managing to get away. But I wasn't the only one to mess up that race, since the Jag died on lap 2 at the first hairpin. Race number 3 was quite the struggle. The first 2 attempts were massive pains in the groin, as I was being bullied by Supra and the Skyline respectively, both of them pulling away from me on the streets. Because of this, I decided to grab full engine balancing and the port and polish upgrades, plus the stage 1 weight reduction, and you'd think that the upgrades would help. So did I. But the first attempt back, I've came in 4th. On my second attempt, I've succeeded, but only just by a hair. The pure sports car cup was a snooze fest, without much happening. All you need to know is that I've won all the races without any issues, bar one on race 1, when I failed to pay attention and drove into a wall, but ended up winning the race regardless, which says a lot. On to the final page of the special events, starting with the tuned Turbo Car Cup. With my past experiences of this event, I decided that it was time to pull out all the stops and slap everything I possibly could on the car, including the racing modification. But only race 2 at test course posed any significant challenge. Maybe I should have kept the car without maximum upgrades, but it would have been a waste of time since my car would have been underpowered and I would have had to go back and upgrade regardless. With that ramble out of the way, going further down the list, we have the Super Touring Cup, which was, like the times before, a breeze, absolute and utter domination. Here's a quick time-lapse of all the races in the series, just to show how pathetic the competition really is. On to the tail end of the game, we have the GT All-Stars. As I've mentioned in my first video, GT All-Stars is basically GT Worlds, but not in a championship format, aka single races. Good way to gauge the competition in my opinion. So, race 1 at Super Speedway was a struggle, but I've managed to ace it on attempt number 1. Since the Egg Boy Oval isn't very long and the AI don't have time to build enough speed to get away before a heavy braking zone on the 2 turns of the lap, lets me catch up and pass them. After a long fought battle, I managed to consolidate my lead over the AI at lap 5, crossing the line at first place. Race number 2 led me to Special Stage Route 5, where due to the relatively weak lineup, I've managed to claim 3rd place, almost 4 seconds behind the lead car. You can clearly see the power disadvantage on the straights, where no matter what I've done, the AI just kept on flying away. And that 3rd place finish was my highest and the only other, since after trying the other races, I failed to see any point in finishing them, chugging along at the tail end of the competition with the lead cars just way out in front. This really dampened my spirits for the GT Worlds, but the fact that it was a championship gave me hope, as you don't need to win all races in the series to claim the title, but that is yet to come. In preparation for the real finale of the game, we have yet to do the GT Asia Pacific and Euro Cups, so let's go get them. GT Euro Cup, Race 1, Apricot Hill. Quite an eventful race, started off like any other, managing to climb halfway through the field midway through lap 1, claiming 1st place at the end of lap 1. Everything was chugging along smoothly for the first half of lap 2, but everything changed when it came down to the hairpin as I spin the car on the exit, dropping down to 4th, nabbing 3rd place right back at the chicane. At the 1-2 turn complex, the leaders brake late and lose quite a bit of time, allowing me to catch up, and midway through the SS I sneak past them both on the inside without any major mistakes. I claim 1st place on the first try. Race 2, Grand Valley. Race starts as per usual. I got up to 3rd on turn 1, losing it on the way to the 2nd hairpin after a small mistake. At said hairpin, I momentarily get 3rd place back, but a Mercedes sneaks on the inside, shoving me back to 4th, but not for long, as I nab 3rd place right back, leading up to the first tunnel. Catching up to the leaders in the chicane at the end of the lap, I try for a dive bomb, momentarily getting 1st place, but dropping down right back to 3rd just as quickly. With the leaders battling each other going into T1 of lap 2, I tried to do the same trick as I did at the chicane, but I ended up braking just a tad too late, ending up in the gravel trap and dropping down to 5th. At the left-hander right before the first tunnel, I get back 3rd place. Speeding through the tunnel, I managed to catch up to the 2nd place roof, sneaking past it in tunnel number 2, keeping good pace, going through the chicane for the 2nd time in the race. I again managed to get 1st place, but only ever so briefly. After that, I managed to get 1st place at T1 of lap 3, but once more failing to make it stick. The TBR quickly screams past me. After the 2nd hairpin, I drop down to 3rd again, but not for too long, as I claim it right back, trying my hardest to keep pace with the TBR. Going into the chicane for the final time, I once more managed to brute force my way into 1st, but in the same fashion, the Cerberus uses me as a rolling wall to ride through the last turn, getting past me and sending me to the grass. I finish the race down in 3rd place. Attempt number 2. This time, the start of the race wasn't as smooth, as I only managed to get an overtake only midway through lap 1, but in the heat of the moment, I managed to get all the way up to 2nd, going past the second tunnel onto the bridge straight, having a small battle right before the start-finish straight at the end of lap 1. The TVR tried to pass me, but I performed the old switcheroo on it, keeping second and sending it to the same place as it did me last race. In the lead up to T1 of lap 2, while braking I lose the rear end of the car, and with some help from the TVR, I get spun round like a record baby, you got it. But I'm not the only one who ended up in the gravel, as a Lotus Esprit decided to brake way too late and got sent to the Shadow Realm. Oh, and I also dropped down to 5th. Fueled by anger, I pressed on, managing to get back to 3rd. At the end of the 3rd Monaco-esque tunnel, pushing onward, keeping great pace through the rest of lap 2 and most of lap 3, I managed to catch up to the leaders and snag 2nd place from the roof. At the 3rd tunnel, and finally confronting my nemesis, the TVR Cerbera at the chicane, managing to make the pass stick, going out and holding both of them back going into the final stretch as I crossed the line in 1st place. Race number 3 at Rome. This time the race was more up to standard, where I managed to get halfway through the field on the 1st lap. Actually, I managed to get up to 2nd on the 1st lap, and after a brief struggle, the 1st place Lotus faltered to me at the Colosseum and failed to pose any significant threat for the rest of the race. GT Asia Pacific Cup. Race 1 at Midfield. This was a breeze, but not an absolute standard one, since I only got an overtake at lap 2, but during lap 2, I managed to pass everyone and held the lead right across the finish line of lap 3, so that's something, I guess. Moving on. Race number 2 at Seattle. This one was on track to be another no effort race, since I passed everyone on turn 1 on lap 1, but the next time around, on T1, again, I got dive bombed and I had to work my way back up. Once I did that, it was all smooth sailing from there. Race number 3 at Laguna Seca. The final race of the series was more a return to form than the previous two, since I managed to claw my way back up to 3rd in the Andretti hairpin on lap 1 and getting up to 1st place by the end of the lap. Afterwards, the race went on, well, as you may think, but the final time at the corkscrew, I was briefly passed by the RX-7. Our struggle lasted up until the final turn, where I took a very defensive line and used the RX-7 as a rolling wall in a not too dissimilar fashion to what of the Cerbera back in Grand Valley, managing to hold the 1st place spot across the line, winning the race. The GT300 Championship. Attempt number 1. Competition. Ari Amelia RX-7, Daishin Silvia S13, BP Apex Craft Trueno, Momo Course Apex MR2, and the Wet Sport Celica GT. Race number 1 at Grand Valley East. I was pretty confident going into this, since my car has very comparable power to the competition. The race was tough from the start, but due to the fact that I had more power than my previous attempts with different cars, keeping up with the pack relatively well, even managing to pass some of the slower cars going into turn 1, which I end up braking late for and immediately losing set positions. But not to fear, I managed to catch them right back. My next move was at lap 2 hairpin, where this time I've managed to dive on the inside of the Trueno and brake late successfully, nabbing 3rd place. Afterwards, I caught up to Silvia and going down the hill into the right-hand sweeper. I managed to secure 2nd, closely following the RX-7 into the next lap. Heading into the hairpin of lap 3, I took the corner too lightly and ended up understeering into the grass on the exit. That in itself wouldn't have been too bad, but I was further bullied by the opposition from behind, ending up in last place. But that wasn't for long, since I took back 5th as soon as I lost it to the Sedan Cup, and almost lost the rear end on the entrance to the tunnel. Right before the finish line of lap 3, I managed to claw back into 4th, passing the MR2. My next pass was right before the tunnel once again, claiming 3rd place as my own from the Trueno, narrowly avoiding a major head-on collision into a wall. Fumbling up the final sequence of turns in the short circuit, my speed was not great going into the home straight for the 4th time, and due to this, the Trueno managed, albeit temporarily, to snatch 3rd place from me, which I immediately remedied going into turn 1 of lap 5. Next, I slammed my younger sister Silvia in the kidney right outside the tunnel to claim 2nd place. With a well-executed final part of the lap, the RX-7 was too quick to catch, so my finishing position is 2nd, netting me 6 points in the process. Race number 2 at Laguna Seca. Compared to the race before, where action was overflowing the entire race, this time the action was more contained to the first lap, where I managed to pass every car. Only the RX-7 managed to give me some trouble, but not too much. Race number 3 at Deep Forest. More of the same. As a matter of fact, all of the races in the rest of the championship were of no real competition, since I didn't mess up, nor wanted to slow down to create tension artificially. So with that only singular hiccup at race 1, I whitewashed the championship with 38 out of 40 possible points, claiming the overall victory in the GT300 championship. This was very expected. I might try to do this championship off screen with less power, just to see if it would make for more exciting racing. Now, let's put our focus on the bigger fish in the pond. Next up, the GT500 championship. Attempt number 1. Competition. Catmo 1 Servo Supra, Pencil Nismo GTR, Mobile 1 NSX, Municia Jet Skyline GTR, STP Tyson Viper GT. Race 1 at Laguna Seca. Race starts off very well with me gaining 2 positions before the end of Sector 1, passing the Viper on the Andretti and the Pennzoil GTR on the lead up to the Firestone Bridge, claiming 3rd place as my own going into turn 5 for leading the CHX GTR. Speeding up 2 and down the corkscrew, I managed to catch up and pass the 2nd place car, which is the Mobile 1 NSX, securing my 2nd place spot past turn 9. And apart from the NSX trying to reclaim 2nd place in the start and finish straight on lap 1, nothing of note happens up until the corkscrew of lap 2, where 2 of the AI competitors have had a kerfuffle and were left behind by everyone else, eventually sorting themselves out. With the lead car flying away, I decided to really focus on getting this win. Luckily, the AI behind me were quite evenly matched, so they were constantly fighting amongst each other, giving me ample opportunity to flex my muscle and make some ground on the Supra. During the latter half of the race, I managed to close the gap and come lap 5, even overtake the lead car at turn 10, but I didn't make it stick through turn 11 and ended up 2nd place. Race 2 at Super Speedway. Nothing much to say about this one, since I took 1st place in 3 turns and kept it for the rest of the race, snagging a very much welcome 8 points, totaling 14 after 2 races. Moving on, Race 3 at Rome Full Circuit. Rome is very much a notorious track for the AI and for the series in general, since it is one of the most difficult tracks to race on if you have an underpowered car like I do, and this race definitely shows. The race started off relatively smoothly, grabbing 3rd place going into the first time around the Coliseum, having a bad exit and dropping down to 5th instantly. Long struggle against the NSX, I dropped out to 6th on the first time around the Coliseum on lap 2. And after another lap of struggling along, trying to keep pace with the opposition, I lose the car on the first right-hand 90-degree turn of Sector 3, which left me in the dust. And even after the long struggle, managing to close the gap somewhat to the AI cars, I finished in last place, getting 1 point, 15 total, and dropping down to second overall. 4 points down with 2 races left. This has really made me focus for the latter half of the series. Race 4 at Trial Mountain. The race started off as per usual, managing to get 4th place in the first corner of Sector 2, almost losing the tail end of the car in mid-speed right-hander, heading into the back straight, with the Inicia hard on my rear. I see the Penzo Nismo wipe out right before the end, at the end of the straight, nearly avoiding a collision, nabbing 3rd place in the process. No action happened during laps 2 and 3, apart from me just slowly inching towards the leaders. With a great run through the first twisty section of lap 4, I managed to sneak past the NSX, keeping the momentum. I managed to sneak past the Supra as well on the inside of the first tunnel. With hard braking, I held the position for the rest of the race, but on the final round through the Yeet chicane, I lost control and slid through the finish line with style, still keeping first place, but trust me, I was sweating once I hit the barrier and went sideways. Good thing I managed to build up a good enough gap between me and the AI to still manage to come out on top, but unfortunately for me, the Supra came in second, leaving a 2-point gap in the overall standings, with 25 points to the Supra and 23 to me. Race 5 at Apricot Hill. The start of the race was pretty weak for me, since the AI just zoomed away from me, but I was confident going in and trying to keep a steady pace, without pushing the car too much. Due to my prior experiences around here, it led me to develop this strategy, and bounce on the opposition at the end of the lap on the chicane, which is very much cuttable without penalty. The first time round, I managed to snag 4th place. Going into lap 2, in the end of the S's, I got bullied into the grass, sending me straight back to 6th. But that did not stop me from sniping not 1, not 2, but 3 full places through the cheese chicane, heading into the run-up to lap 3. At the same place as in the last lap, I tried to swoop in into second, but the Penzo Nismo was too fast, and it didn't stick. It was actually so fast that, in fact, it managed to pass the Supra to the lead, while I managed to get past it in the chicane, claiming second, blocking it going into lap 4. The same story as from the previous lap repeats, but seeing as me and the Nismo were going too fast, I backed out earlier and the Nismo went out of bounds, even if not completely. Still keeping pace with the lead car, heading into the chicane of cheese, I sniped the lead from the Nismo and holding great momentum into the run-up for the final lap. For the first turn, the Nismo was on my rear in the braking zone, but not for too long. I decided not to push the car so much, but I still managed to build up a gap through the lap, mainly thanks to the cheese chicane at the end. Consolidating my victory further, the Supra came in 3rd, scoring only 4 points, allowing me to move into my rightful place as the winner, with a overall point tally of 31 to the Supra's 29. And even with a rather solid 2nd place finish, the Penzo Nismo came in 4th overall, 2 points down from its older brethren, the R33 Inicia GTR, which ended the championship with 18 points. I was very surprised that the GT500 championship turned out so well, and not to mention that was my first attempt at completing this. Its difficulty really came down to the tracks, my ability in comparison to the AIs to race on them, and the exploitability of said tracks. Not to mention that the AI cars were very closely matched in the series, so a surprise upset or two is really not out of the question. And with this knowledge, we head into the final series of the game, the GT World Championship. Alright, now after you've had your fun, tap to see me succeed for once. Opposition: Venturi Atlantique 600 LM, Audi TT LM, Lister Storm V12, Vector M12 LM, Ford GT40 race car. Straight away the AI flies away, and I end up fighting the Lister for over half of lap 1 for 5th place, finally managing to make the overtake stick right before the beginning of Sector 3. Once I had a bit of clearance, I managed to get a great run-up into lap 2, which allowed me to catch up to the lead cars, managing to sneak by the Venturi and Ford in the fast chicane section right after the start-finish line. I end up getting passed by the Venturi on the back straight, which I quickly remedy by going on the inside of said Venturi at the end of the straight, making the pass stick. Going into the start-finish straight, after a good run out of the final hairpin and through the Yeet chicane, I managed to catch up to the Vector, and with the extra momentum I managed to get the pass on it and confirming it going into Sector 1 of lap 3. Not too long after, I catch the lead car and sneak in on the inside of the first tunnel turn. After a brief struggle on the back straight, I pull away somewhat, but I end up messing up the Yeet chicane and lose some time. Going into lap 4, still in the lead, the GT40 coming in hot, and again, with a brief struggle on the back straight, I managed to get some ground on the GT40, and without any more interference, I pull away into lap 5, and what a flawless lap it was. I managed to get a sub 1 minute 20 lap time, which is a record for me in this series, which is nice. Race 2 at Laguna Seca. After fiddling around in the settings, I started the race. The race was like any other, spinning the rear wheels, managing my first pass on turn 5, claiming 5th place from the Lister, hitting down the corkscrew. The GT40 had an accident and lost control, letting me slip past, claiming 4th. With a great run down to turn 9, I unfortunately slammed into the back of the Vector, but managing to get past on turn 10, but I couldn't make it stick on turn 11, dropping back down to 4th. Nothing much happened for the rest of the lap, only up until the corkscrew, where the Vector lost control heading up to it, and letting me nab 3rd place. Keeping up the pressure throughout lap 3, I managed to catch 2nd place Audi, and sneak past it on turn 9, making it stick. Still keeping good pace and inching also closer to the Venturi in first, I've only managed to close in on it at the end of lap 5, taking 1st place at turn 10 ever so briefly, being passed at turn 11 due to me being too careful through it, slipping down to 2nd, claiming 6 points, 14 overall. Still managing to hold on to the 1st place overall, with the Venturi climbing up to 2nd with 12 points. Race 3 at Apricot Hill. Oh boy, race 3 was a doozy. First overtake was on the Lister in lap 1 at the S's. Afterwards, I smashed past the GT40, Audi, and Venturi at the Cheese chicane, being swiftly passed by the Venturi, holding off the Ford and Audi, keeping 4th place on the straight, snatching 3rd from the Ford in the heavy braking zone of the 1-2 turn complex. Keeping good pace throughout the lap allowed me to snag 1st place in the Cheese chicane, holding my lead through the straight into lap 3, messing up on the 1-2 complex, dropping down back to 3rd. Not losing hope and still holding momentum, I managed to keep pace with the leaders through the S's, and on the final right-hander I battled the Venturi for 2nd, doing a sneaky early braking maneuver which sent the Venturi off track, allowed me to get up to 2nd. The GT40 and Venturi kept me on my toes up until the Cheese chicane, where I attempted to do my usual speedrun strat, but I got duked by the leader and smashed head-on into the left barrier, losing momentum and briefly dropping down to 5th. On the straight, reclaiming 4th midway through the lap, Keeping up the pressure, I pushed on to the bane of my existence, the cheese chicane, where I struck the rear end of the GT40, still managing to get past. I was sweating bullets, but with a superb performance throughout the final lap and the leaders battling each other, which sent the Venturi into the grass, leading up to the cheese chicane, which I managed to take advantage of, sneaking past it right before the chicane and zoom past the Vector through the chicane, claiming first. With some mild blocking, I managed to cross the line in first place, claiming 8 points. The Vector managed to get second, snagging 6 points, and my main rival, the Venturi, scraped by in third with 4 points to its name, increasing my lead to 6 points. This is not ideal, since winning the first 3 races is the key to victory, but I can't back out now. Race 4 at Rome. A very non-eventful race, with the start of it being rather poor, as the AI just flew away, with me managing the only passes in the race, taking place right before the halfway point of lap 1, managing to get past the GT40 and Lister, pulling away from the Lister and managing to hold off the GT40 up until the end of lap 2, where it sneaks past me, going on to win the race outright, which was probably the most favorable outcome of what I could have expected, since there was no way I was going to catch up to any of the AI, as the AI is very skilled at navigating the Rome circuit, and the GT40 is overpowered, but in a good way. Unfortunately, the Vector didn't hold on to second place, which led the Venturi to claim it and alongside 6 points, with an overall of 22 to my 24. Miraculously maintaining the overall lead, I headed into the final race of the series. Race 5 at Midfield Raceway. The start of the race was like any other, with the first pass coming at around the midway point of lap 1, where I get up to 5th place, getting past the Lister, keeping good pace and having the GT40 and Venturi fighting each other. I swooped around the outside and very briefly got 3rd place, losing it as quickly as I gained it, going down the hill into the tunnel hairpin. Heading into the straight, it was obvious that if I were to win this championship, I had to be very lucky and bank on the AI roughing each other up, and having the Venturi finish as low as possible, ideally behind me. But as I thought that, I missed the braking point on turn 1 and went off track, losing my 5th place, but I managed to get it back at the same place where I originally took it. For the rest of the race, I kept my pace strong, and with the help of the rubber band and the AI fighting amongst themselves during the latter half of lap 5, right outside the crossover bridge in the left-hand sweeper, in a heated battle with the GT40, the Venturi slipped down to 4th, albeit very briefly. It slowed down the then 3rd place Audi enough for me to sling past, getting up to 4th, following the Venturi's ongoing conflict for 2nd with the GT40. It ran out of steam as it took the slower line into the straight, but all was not in the clear, as the 5th place Audi was on my tail and it wasn't going to go out without a fight. Throughout all of that action, I messed up the exit onto the straight, going into the grass while trying to block the Audi, which I've almost let by, somehow managing to grind it into a halt on the pit wall, crossing the line in 4th place, claiming 3 points. The Venturi came in 3rd with 4 points to its name, with the GT40 getting a close 2nd and 6 points, and the eventual winner being the Vector claiming 8 points. If I had finished 5th, it would have been a 3-way tie for 1st, which I'm sure would have went to me, but if the GT40 would have won the race outright, I would have lost the championship, which would have been very, very sad. But after seeing myself at the top of the leaderboard, I was absolutely overjoyed, which I really shouldn't be since I'm a grown-ass man, being happy that I've won a series against a computer in a video game. But that didn't stop me from silently yelling out to myself. This victory marks a monumental achievement in the series and proves that you can indeed win the GT World Championship in a car that you can buy at the start of the game for under 10,000 credits. Mind you, it's not stock and was fully upgraded, but still, it really did amaze me at what could be done and how good the car actually is. And I do hope that this isn't the last time the credits will roll in this series. Plenty of cars are left to be ran, and I do hope I'll be able to compare all of them. As for the ranking of the car, I would be giving it a disservice if I wouldn't put it up in S tier. It is currently, to my knowledge, the only car you can buy at the start and beat the game with, so it is only fair. And I really didn't struggle too much on winning the game, well, apart from me taking around 30 or so attempts to get this done. Most of the attempts were mainly practice, so I could more consistently nail the first 3 races. Well, mainly race 2 at Laguna. That one is usually the bane of my existence, since the final 2 races are virtually impossible to win. And a bit of a tangent of why I haven't made a video in like 3 or 4 months. Most of it was due to me being lazy and being not very confident at work, but that should hopefully be a thing of the past. My confidence issues alongside my laziness, and I hope I'll be able to make some more of these videos and increase their quality. I've been using the EPSXC emulator and I'm not very happy with it, mainly due to the annoying black bars on the side, which I haven't found a solution to get rid of. If you guys know of any better alternatives to EPSXC, please let me know. I haven't used DuckStation, but I'll try to see if I can run it, and hopefully it won't give me the aspect ratio issues like the EPSXC emulator, or maybe it's the game having a fit and refusing to cooperate. But anyways, thank you all for sticking around long enough to the end of the video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and if you have any suggestions, critiques, please leave them down in the comments. Also leave a like if you liked the video and a dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe if you'd like. I'm not going to hold a gun to your head. And with that bombshell, I bid you a great rest of your day.